من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، لا سيما رسول الله في الأرض روحي وروح الأمين رب الفداء. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Dear brothers and sisters, it's a great honor to be here. It's my first time here, but inshallah it's not the last time. I also know that it's Sunday. Brothers and sisters have sacrificed for the sake of Allah. They're here, and this is their day off. So inshallah today we'll keep it short and sweet. It won't be too long, inshallah. The topic that I was given was Islam and today's challenges. We want to talk about Islam being relevant and what are some Islamic solutions to the challenges that we face, inshallah. So, what I figured we would do was go to God's book, to the Holy Quran, and seek some inspiration from the verses of the Holy Quran, some practical lessons which are clear and apparent in the verses of the Quran, and use them as inspiration to go forward. Brothers and sisters, we're at a very critical time. The story that I've chosen to give you is part of the story of Yusuf. Surah Yusuf, it's verse number 23. This is an interesting part in his story, a critical time in his life, and he made some right decisions that ended up pushing the mission of God forward. We also are in a critical time. We're in a time where there are challenges, a lot of challenges to our faith as believers. If we can hold fast, if we can take inspiration from these verses, then we can affect the course of history for mankind. We can bring the world closer to the reappearance of our master, the 12th Imam, if we're able to take the right lessons and act in the right way. If not, God forbid, then we could be part of the problem and not part of the solution. When we look in Tafsir al-Nizam, when they first start telling this story, and I feel like this is a relevant point for all of us. He says, he has a discussion for each surah, he talks about the gharad, or the purpose of the surah. What is the main lesson that God's trying to teach us? One of the things that he says about this particular surah is that this is a surah which gives a lot of hope. In this surah, we will see that many of the things that were supposed to be against Yusuf, supposed to bring Yusuf down, supposed to humiliate Yusuf, these things themselves started being the things that propelled Yusuf forward and were reasons for his glory and his izzah and his honor in this world, and of course, his station in the next. So the part that I've chosen is a little bit of a controversial part. This part of the story, it's just a little part of the story that's very interesting, and then after that, the lesson that we can get. Yusuf alayhi salam is around 18, what we learned from the tafasir. Around 18. Yusuf had been sold into slavery by his own brothers. They were jealous of him. They saw that their father Yaqub loved him. Of course, his father loved him. But the brothers couldn't take that. Why is it that their father loves this individual and his brother more than us? We are the people who are carrying the weight in the family. According to worldly standards, we should be more important. But we see our father loves this individual. So they went and they sold him into slavery. When they sold him into slavery, they wanted to cause him to be forgotten, his father to forget him. They would have their father all to themselves. They would make tawbah. Allah made it that now their father loved him even more. He grieved so much for Yusuf. You've heard the story. That he was grieving so much he lost his eyesight. So instead of the father forgetting Yusuf, sending him away wasn't the reason for dhillah or for humiliation or even for forgetting Yusuf. The opposite happened. The next thing that happened was another challenge though. When the Aziz, the person who according to some of the tafasir is the second most powerful man in Egypt, he could see the signs that this young man was special. And when he brought him into the house, he instructed his wife. He said, I want you to honor him, to look after him. So she brought him into the house, and of course she was going to follow the instructions. Yusuf, when he came in, he came as a young boy. Charming, handsome, good akhlaq, patient, wise, every good thing that you could expect. But now what happened was that Yusuf, alayhi salam, we learned from some of the ahadith, they said Allah granted him the beauty and jamal of half of creation. Right? So if you divided the beauty that's there in the world, one half of it was in this individual, one half of it is in all of the rest of mankind. So when he was in the house with this young lady, after a while, evil thoughts came into her mind. And the Quran starts to describe the situation. And we're going to see how this compares now to our situation. How does it compare to our situation? Right now, we're here as believers. When we take study of the Holy Quran, we don't want to just learn the Quran about stories that happened way in the past. Ancient history. We learn what happened, this prophet lived at this time, died at that time. Rather, the ahadith tell us that the Quran is hayyun la yamut. The Quran is alive and it doesn't die. And the ayat also apply. So we have to be looking for ourselves. Who's Yusuf of the time? What are the tests of the time? Who would possibly be taking us away from Allah, and how we can remain steadfast. So the verse says this, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. Zulaykha tried to seduce Yusuf. He was in her house, she tried to seduce Yusuf. وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. She closed the doors to try and get Yusuf to disobey Allah. وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. She told Yusuf to come forward. Yusuf had a different response. What was Yusuf's response? The Quran says, قَالَ مَعَاذَ اللَّهِ. I seek refuge in Allah. إِنَّهُ رَبِّي أَحْسَنَ مَثْوَايَ. Allah is my Lord. He's taking care of me. He's given me everything that I have in this world. How would I violate His laws? And then he said this, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ. Those people who are oppressors, they're never successful. Those who go against what God says, they're never successful. So Yusuf went back to Allah in the time of trial and difficulty, and then we'll see what happened. So what happens is this. Let's see how this applies to us. When I said that we're in a time of crisis right now, if you look at where we, as Shia of Amirul Mu'mineen, were, and the older generation will affirm this, confirm this for you. If you look at where we were around 40 years ago, where we were on the map, how relevant we were, how important we were, how much we, as Shia Amirul Mu'mineen, could change the world situation, you'll see that our situation was pitiful. We weren't strong. We weren't the people who are game changers. We were dominated. If you look back at our home countries, where we were dominated. Even Muslims who came to the West back in the day, some of them didn't come with strength as believers. Some Muslims came, and if they could do anything, it was to show that Islam is like the West. That you have democracy, we have something similar to democracy. You have this, the Quran is confirmed by science. Right? The stance was very different from the stance now, and why there's so much pressure. What happens now is that we believers have gone back to Quran. So of course, we're not where we need to be yet. I'm not saying that it's all over, the victory is happening. We're going towards that direction. Where we need to be as believers is actually something very different. We believe we're supposed to be preparing the world for the return of our imam. Our job is to liberate the globe from oppression. That means, though, that we have to stand up for our own values and believe in our own values. The same way in the story of Yusuf, that there was pressure which was trying to take him away from Allah. In this story, it was a woman, the second most powerful woman in the land, and if you disobeyed her, there was punishment. We learn later in the Quran that she threatened him. You'll go to prison. You will suffer if you don't obey. Now there's a different kind of pressure. What they want from us, brothers and sisters, is that they want us to secularize. Become a secular Muslim. That your faith, whatever you have, that's in your own house. But it's not a faith which demonstrates itself, which is strong, which is powerful, which is not apologetic. They want that. And even within Shia Islam, you have to be very careful. There are some Shias who are either pushing for secular Shia Islam, which is very dangerous, or backward sectarian Shia Islam. Well, all I will do is talk about the Khulafa or Sunni brothers or how backwards they are and lead to more fighting amongst the believers. That's one danger. Or the secular kind of Islam, which has no problem with tyrants. So now what's the solution? For us as believers, we have to take inspiration from this story. When he faced pressure to compromise on his principles, what did he say? Ma'adallah. Back to God. Seek refuge in Allah. Allah doesn't reward those people who are zalimun, those people who are oppressors, who violate Allah's laws. They don't even get the success that they want, even in this world. But think about it though. From a parent point of view, either you submit to the second most powerful woman, the wife of the second most powerful woman, and all man, and all of the land, and apparently all of the dunya is at your disposal, or you stick to your guns. You stick to your principles. So, how can we get that inner strength to make the right decision? Not to be people who, under the face of pressure, either become secular Muslims or abandon the faith or run away from the obstacles or are shy and ashamed of being Muslim. Because the way forward for all of us, the way forward now is not to hide our faith. If we want to see the end of Islamophobia, that means now is the time to actually make the world aware of Islam's teachings, the opposite of what the enemy wants. So the question is, how can I get that inner strength? How can I feel that I belong? How can I hold fast to my principles and not apologize for this wonderful religion? You see, sometimes if we knew a secret, you could get strong. If I knew the game was rigged, now it's the playoffs, right? It's a bad example, but bear with me. There's one time when playoffs are happening, and I'm trying to figure out which team to support. Should I support Peyton Manning? Should I be on the side of Tom Brady? I want to know. If I knew the outcome of the game, I knew who was going to win, it'd be easier. I know who was going to win. I could throw my weight behind somebody. God has given us some of the secrets of the universe. Secrets to how the world works. And ways for us to discover inner strength. One of them is a verse from the Holy Quran. This is Surah Masjid, Surah 5, verse number 105. Over there in the Quran, Allah gives us a promise. This isn't my promise. It's not your promise. It's not even the promise of Amir al-Mu'mineen. God's promise. What does God tell us? He says, O you who believe, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, alaykum anfusakum. Take care of yourselves. Do your responsibility. La yaghurrukum man dhalla idha ihtadaytum. Don't worry about those who are misguided. What they're doing, Islamophobia, the pressures, the challenges, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, what are they going to do? Will we win or not? He said, God promises, if you do your job, alaykum anfusakum, definitely you'll be victorious. So now, what we need to do though, is we need to take these teachings that we find in Quran and Sunnah, take them from being words in a book, God's book, and translate them into our own lives. If you want deep faith, you have to act on what you know. One of the problems with sin, going against what I believe, is that it weakens Iman itself. Weakens Iman itself. So what do we know, or how should we believe? Sometimes you can learn lessons from little kids. You can learn lessons from anybody. Sometimes you can learn lessons from little kids. Once they said that there was a mother, and she was making pancakes, and she had two little boys, Jack and Ryan. And the boys, when she made the first pancake, the boys started fighting with one another about who would get the first pancake. And so then the lady said, this is a good time to teach them a moral lesson. She said, boys, if Jesus was here, you know what Jesus would say? Jesus would say, let my brother have the pancake. I'll have the second pancake. So Jack turned to his little brother, Ryan. He said, Ryan, you be Jesus. I'm not going to. Sometimes for us as believers, right now, I said the time isn't to apologize for our faith. It's time to be strong. Apologetic Muslims, they don't get anywhere. They're not impressive. The world right now, we have to keep this in mind. The world right now isn't, we don't want to think everybody who's a non-Muslim, all hate Islam. A lot of the people are absolutely uninformed. I don't know how many of you know my story. My family was not Muslim. We were not Shia, not Muslim. My family now, my extended family, I'm from America. My extended family, many of them, they're not Muslims. The slip that we can make, you and I can make, is to believe the media and think everybody's against us. The reality is, a lot of people are curious. A lot of people are curious. But now, non-Muslims, some of them have almost no information about Islam. Some of them have some information about Islam. God forbid, if a believer is apologetic about his faith, the message they're getting about your Islam is going to be the wrong message. I'll give you some examples. One of them, for instance, as a believer, they know that you have a problem with gender interaction in a way which is not halal. For instance, shaking the hands is something that as believers, we don't do the opposite gender. They come to shake the hand, we don't do that. What happens to some Muslims? In the name of good akhlaq, or either because they're weak, they'll go over and they'll shake their hand. The hand of the person who's the opposite gender. The non-Muslim who is uninformed about Islam, later on when one of you tries to explain what true Islam is, and you explain the wisdom behind these things, he's like, but such and such is a Muslim. They shake hands. There's other principles in Islam. The way forward, brothers and sisters, is to figure out what Islam says, and then after that, to make sure that Islam is. I want to give you one last story. This is now fast forwarding to the Bani Israel when they were in Egypt. When God talks about Bani Israel in Egypt, He says that, this is in Surah Qasas, He says that Inna Fir'auna ala fil ard, that Pharaoh was arrogant in the land. وَجَعَلَ أَهْلَهَا شِيَعًا. Pharaoh made Ahl of Misr, he made them into groups and sections. Right? He divided the people up. One of them were given privileges, one of them he weakened. Now I have a question for you guys. Bani Israel were the Muslims at the time, right? Yes or no? Bani Israel, at the time of Musa, were they Muslims? The Muslims of the time? Yes or no? Sisters? Bani Israel at the time. Were they Muslims? They were following Musa. They were Muslims at the time. Okay. Where were they from? Were they from Egypt? Huh? Were they immigrants? In Egypt, they were immigrants. They came from somewhere else, right? But what does God say about them? God says they made Ahlaha, the people of Egypt, into groups. God didn't refer to them as immigrants, second-class people, second-class citizens. No, the Islamic perspective is that the earth belongs to Allah. Inna al-arda lillah. Wherever we are is where we're supposed to be. There's no reason that as a believer, even if I'm coming here to Canada, for instance, and let's say there's a better standard of living here than it is back home, should that mean I feel lucky to be here? I'm a second-class citizen. I don't have the right to stand up and defend Islam and say that I'm different. I should just try and conform because I'm just so lucky to be here. The Quranic perspective is very different. The earth belongs to Allah. Wherever the believers are, that's their place. The job of the believers, brothers and sisters, is to be strong in their faith and stand for Islam's principles. We'll end with that, brothers and sisters. Inshallah, we'll make the dua of the Imam. Inshallah, I think there's some snacks. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli waliyyika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan salawatuka alayhi wa ala abaihi في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا ومعينا حتى تسكنه عرضك طوعا تمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآله.